Hello everybody, thank you so much for coming despite the sun. I was actually disappointed when I saw the sun this morning because I thought everyone's going to go to Kilkee or Lahinch or wherever your chosen spot is. So thank you to those who've come on this final day of Research Week to our session entitled Inclusive Society, Brighter Futures. It is an absolute privilege and I'm so proud to open this talk. Every single speaker that contributes to this today are just phenomenal human beings, brilliant researchers, and I want to thank them all for all of their hard work and preparation today. I'm not going to spend any more time talking. We've got a fabulous lineup of speakers. I just want you to sit back and relax and enjoy the wonderful contributions that you'll hear over the next 90 minutes. I'm going to hand over to my head of school, Professor Judy Pettigrew, and she will introduce our wonderful keynote speaker for today. Judy, over to you.
So, welcome everybody, absolutely delighted to see you here. So it's my privilege to introduce somebody that we've been working with for some years now. It's her second visit to the University of Limerick, and that's Professor Sue Bazyk. So just a little bit about Sue. She's an adjunct professor here in the School of Allied Health. She's a Professor Emerita in an occupational therapy program at Cleveland State University, and she taught there for 34 years, teaching on the pediatric occupational therapy courses and serving as director of the graduate certificate in school-based practice. Throughout her career, Sue has specialised in occupational therapy research and practice with children and youth in home, school and community-based settings. Her research interests include public health approaches to children's mental health, school-based occupational therapy, mixed methods research, knowledge translation and implementation, and capacity building of frontline school personnel. Sue is the founding director of Every Moment Counts, a multi-pronged mental health promotion initiative that supports children's mental health to help them succeed at school, at home, and in their communities. Sue, we're delighted you're here and welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here this morning to share with you about the comfortable cafeteria and obtaining children's voice. And before I start, I want to thank my host here in collaboration with Dr. Pettigrew, and also a shout out to Dr. Brian Fitzgerald with the NCSC. We've worked together over the years and have had a fabulous week with therapists and in the schools. So this topic really fits nicely with the theme of inclusive society, brighter futures. I'll give a very brief background to Every Moment Counts, the comfortable cafeteria, and research findings related to obtaining children's voice. But before I start with that, I do like to just make the point that schools are very complex settings. And many factors guide what we do, so we really have to think in very big ways about the context, which could be the country, legislation, which certainly impacts what we do, and evolving school practices, which globally the emphasis is inclusion and integrating services in the natural environment. So the benefits of working in schools, providing services in schools, is that we get to see children where they participate outside their home, becoming individual, independent human beings, participating throughout the day. And we get to do this in rich collaboration with interdisciplinary professionals. So just very quickly, we've had 50 years in the schools in the United States based on special ed legislation. We entered in a very rigid caseload model, which we're trying to correct. Over the years, we have expanded more and more into the general education environment and also really looking at school mental health, which I'm going to talk about today. So practice does evolve. And speaking of health, there is a heightened attention to health internationally in schools, both physical and emotional or mental health. Why is that? We know that children who are healthy do better academically, socially, and emotionally. And so I point out the World Health Organization's publication, Making Every School a Health-Promoting School. I recommend that you look at that. It's globally something, everybody's thinking about. So as health providers in school, we have vast opportunities to contribute to and impact the health and well-being of students. So that brings us to Every Moment Counts. Back in 2011, along with some occupational therapy colleagues, we really started looking at this public health, multi-tiered approach to mental health. And we started to envision how could we really focus more on mental health promotion in the schools. We were funded for 3 years, and during that period, we developed, implemented, and evaluated a lot of different programs and strategies. The goal, and Judy had said this, it's a multi-pronged mental health promotion initiative. The focus is building capacity of school providers to implement this work, to tune into mental health and embed strategies throughout the day. And we disseminate our work broadly using our website, publications, and presentations. So this website is very information dense. It has information about all of our initiatives that are free and downloadable, so you can access that. And it can be translated into 100 different languages, which I know people across the globe are using. This tiered framework, if you look at this pyramid, we are focusing on Tier 1 mental health promotion for all students, with and without disabilities and/or mental health challenges. So Tier 1 is the whole. You see that green area, that's everyone. And when we do these Tier 1 services, we have our eyes laser set on children who may be struggling emotionally, as well as those who may not be doing well. So we're really serving everyone in that context. The guiding philosophy, and if you look at our logo, we really thought about it's not one time of the day, it's every moment does count. Small moments make big differences in how children feel and function. Every child has a right to participate and enjoy their day, and that enjoyable experiences, based on research, really enhance feelings of emotional well-being. So we're really looking at all of that. And it doesn't mean doing more necessarily, but doing differently through embedded strategies. So if everyone has a knowledge of mental health promotion and knows the evidence to support positive mental health, how can we creatively embed that knowledge in the interactions and activities throughout the day? This initiative was developed by occupational therapists, and we really think of our scope of practice and our commitment to participation in the occupations and interactions that help people be mentally healthy, physically healthy. And a lot of that is fostering healthy habits and interests. So as we look throughout the day, not only in the classroom, but lunchtime, breakfast time, after school, play yard breaks, what are children doing? And are they doing things that help them learn how to be and be healthy? So we have a number of initiatives, and today I will talk about the comfortable cafeteria. But the initiatives, we say developed by OTs, but implemented by all. We all have to do this work. So why did we look at non-academic times of the day? These unstructured times are really critical. And we know that when children have good friends and positive interactions, that they feel connected to school. And that feeling connected to school enhances them wanting to go to school, their academic performance, and emotional well-being. So this monograph, Bloom, that I've cited here, it's from 2005, but it's very good on school connectedness. You can access it online. And by the way, I will share a Padlet link with you with the PowerPoint and resources at the end. So the Comfortable Cafeteria, we have two. They're sister programs and Refreshing Recess. Why did we feel they were needed is that supervisors generally aren't educated and supported in their role in helping foster positive social interactions or promote positive behavior. And students aren't always made a part of creating positive environments. So sometimes we see negative things happen, like children who are bullied or getting in trouble and sent to the principal's office, things like that. So we developed these programs to promote participation and health. This one is during lunch, to build capacity of the supervisors to be effective, and to promote the development of soft skills that can often be nurtured during these unstructured times when they're not in a real controlled classroom. Not that all classrooms are controlled, but in a structured environment. So things like how to be a good friend, have a mealtime conversation, respect differences and inclusion. That's a big one. You know, we would have less bullying if children really, we focus on kindness and respecting differences. So this is a tier 1 program, but it could be implemented in a small group, like a lunch group, but we designed it as universal, and in that universal program, we're gonna tune into the children who may not be doing well. And that could be introverts, those with social challenges, and the list is here. Everything on implementing the program is on our website. This is like a user manual with what we would do every week. And so it's a 6-week, 1-day-a-week program to really prime the pump. And the facilitators, their role is to educate about best practices, model weekly activities and positive social interaction, serve as a coach and problem solver. And then after the program, we want continued kind of coaching to ensure sustainability. So based on the literature, a lot of literature about meal times is about nutrition, but we felt a real need to look at more the social emotional aspects. So our vision statement is very clear. Our school will provide pleasant and positive meal times so that all students will enjoy eating food and socializing with friends and adults. So you could see we have a theme each week with simple materials and messages to foster friendships, conversation, respect, tuning into the sensations. We did that because in the US, I don't think you have this problem here, we have very big cafeterias that are very loud, and some students really struggle with the noise. So we do some work on volume control, and then healthy food choices. So if you look at materials on active supervision, this was another issue. Many supervisors are kind of there, reactive, you know, just kind of on the side of the room, and if children are getting in trouble, they intervene. But active supervision is really about moving around, interacting. We call it working the crowd. And so we have materials on active supervision and what that looks like. We also have fun materials for the children. Before the program, they get a coloring sheet. It could be in the classroom. They get a bookmark, and I've got some bookmarks and information sheets for you. But we see children having them at their desk, and it is a literacy thing. You can see, you know, when we think of expectations, the first one is enjoy a meal. We want them to enjoy their time. Week 2, I'm not going to go through each week, but week 2 is really just planting seeds about friendship. If children have friends, they're less likely to be bullied. So we have conversations about what makes a good friend. And supervisors start learning to tune into, you know, are the children, do they have friends? Are there loners? Week 3 is fun, and we've done this program with speech language pathologists in the United States. I mean, this is the time for functional communication. And, you know, now don't really look at that first one, look at the person, because we know that some children may not use eye contact a lot, but just really planting the seeds about mealtime conversations is a life skill. We provide conversation starters. We have a conversation cube for the younger children. We actually have them sit by someone new for 1 week and practice their conversation skills. The Family Dinner Project has a great section. It's a US site on family dinners. Family dinners are so important, but they have a whole section on conversation starters, so we can put those at the table. So simple things, right? And then the last week is food tasting. This is absolutely such a favorite. We bring in healthy foods like spinach, hummus, things that maybe children haven't been exposed to, and it's a great conversation starter. And children will say, well, my mom makes hummus this way, and just things like that. So how do we measure outcomes? And a program like this, you really have to think so carefully. How are we going to measure the outcomes? We used mixed methods research, really wanting to look at what is the meaning of and impact of the program from the student perceptions as well as supervisors. And it's published in the American Journal of Occupational Therapy. So here's now to thinking about children's voice. 1989, the United Nations Convention on Children's Rights of Children states that children have a right to be listened to and have that information applied in practice. And there is a specific attention to children with disabilities have the right as well. So how do we do this? We need to use a range of approaches that are child-centered, first of all. And then this journal article I have referenced at the end is specific to obtaining the child's voice of children with complex developmental and communication needs. So really thinking very broadly about a toolbox approach to enable voice, multimodal, flexible approaches, time to develop relationships, visual systems of communication, observation in a variety of contexts, so on. And then when it comes to interviewing, there's a lot of information on interviewing children, and many of you probably know this, but interviews are powerful in obtaining children's thoughts, intentions, and feelings, since these are not always easily observable. And the biggest challenge is the power differential. Children may think that they have to act a certain way or say things in front of adults. So what do we need to do is transform into a more childlike adult by being playful, interviewing students in small groups, they're comfortable with their peers, incorporating age-appropriate activities. Children do talk more when they're doing things. So that's important, instead of just facing them head on. And of course, rapport. And then using multiple data sources, such as observation. So our research question, we did mixed methods. This is the quantitative. We use single group pre and post test. The research question is, what is the effect of the program on student perceptions of participation and enjoyment of activities and friendliness of supervisors and peers during lunch? We had grades 1 through 4 from 4 districts with an N of 336. This was an inclusive cafeteria. We used a pre and post visual analog scale for measurement. Visual analog scales are graphic scales used to rate a subjective experience by the person experiencing it. It could be mood, feeling, pain, but our 4 questions were, here you can see them. How much did you enjoy your time at lunch? How friendly are lunch supervisors? How friendly are students at lunch? And how much did you enjoy conversations? So we did have a practice question before they did the rating scale. They put a hatch marks at their perception. So when we looked at the pretest scores, we were able to kind of divide the students into 3 minutes, okay, into 3 categories: high enjoyers, mid enjoyers, and low enjoyers. And you can see the low enjoyers was a smaller percentage, 8.5, but those are really your at-risk students. And at the end, what we did with the paired t-test, match paired t-test, we did see statistically significant improvements in both the mid-enjoyers and low enjoyers. And so that's our quantitative findings. And they are in Table 1 in our publication. And so now is really the fun part, is obtaining their voice via interview. So we went in after we implemented the program, and this is just in one of the classes, and we asked them, what did you think about the program, and what did you learn? So here's a very short clip.
I learned that everyone has different feelings and different friends. That you have to be helpful and not to make fun of people, not bullying, and be yourself. Be kind to your friends. Stand up for them. Use good manners. Help other people.
And that is just the icing on the cake. You have quantitative, but you asked them, and they actually repeated all the little themes that we planted throughout the program. And that is what brings us joy. So the supervisor, we did pre and post with the supervisors and really strong results. And then we also have a clip, I don't have time, but you want to, any relevant stakeholder, when you're implementing a program, you need their voice on what did you think about it, what did you learn, what should we do differently. And the exciting thing about this one, let me see if I can zoom forward. How many minutes do I have left? One? Okay. Just listen to this part.
And then you can learn more about them. And so it's great for me to encourage them. This is what needs to be done.
Sometimes that's all they need is a little
Right.
encouragement. This is their social time, and this is the time to make a difference.
So we raised their awareness to tuning into friendships, conversations. And the other voice you need to hear is the principal. We interviewed the principal, and there's a little video here. And he was talking about how valued this program was. They can go home and talk about what they learned. And then anecdotal feedback, I don't rule out. We see that children are happy. They're excited, they run up and give hugs, they want to know what they're going to do that day. And then market your successes. So share your success story is very critical when you're doing something new and it's innovative. This school in Texas, the therapists implemented it, and their blog stated, next generation occupational therapists address mental health one meal at a time. And also quoted parents. My son was stressed, and with implementation of the program, now he's happy and eating all his food. It was a very chaotic cafeteria. So closing thoughts, advocate for integrating therapy services in unstructured times of the day to promote participation and inclusion, skill development, and health and well-being. So thank you so much. This is the Padlet link with the PowerPoint.
Just a wonderful sense of all of your work and the impact of that in universal level in terms of participation in schools. So thank you so much. We're going to move on now to our lightning talks. And we're going to what's lovely, I think, about the selection is we actually bridge lots of different contexts in our work, in our inclusive work with children. So Dr. Anya Kearns will start and talk about inclusive justice. We then have two lovely community-embedded projects to share with you, both Citizens' Assembly winners. So they will share their projects. And then we'll move on to adolescents. And can I just say a special thank you to our three amazing PhD candidates. It takes a lot of courage to come and present at Research Week, and you've been incredible to work with, so well done, and thank you for your contribution. And then Caroline and Rachel are going to talk to you about a couple of projects specifically to do with developmental difficulty with language development. last but very much not least, we have Dr. Brian Fitzgerald, who's travelled all the way down from Baile Átha Cliath today. And he is going to talk to you about some novel approaches to inclusive classrooms from the perspective of OTs. So I won't introduce each talk individually because it's a fast-paced kind of 5-minute talk for each speaker. So I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Anya Kearns to kick us off.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity to present this research. This is actually a collaboration between UL and the Accompaniment Support Service for Children. And in this research, we sought to explore what does child-friendly justice mean in an Irish context. And I'm going to start with a quote from a participant. The conversation of the justice system is really important. It is also important to remember that people don't like to hear about children as victims, regardless of what the crime is. And I think especially so when it comes to sexual violence. And it's true, we don't want to think about it. But we do know that children and their families will face barriers when they engage in the justice system because it's a system that is built for adults. It is built on a principle of orality. And if you have speech, language and communication needs due to your developmental stage or disability, you're going to find it very difficult to navigate. And so with this in mind, we know that those vulnerable witnesses are going to need support to be able to have their voices heard. And we also know that there is psychological trauma within this space. And we know as well that those children that navigate that system are likely to have poorer outcomes. They may actually have poor mental health, they may have negative attitudes to the justice system. And this can be further compounded by the pre-trial delays and also just the uncertainties of the legal process. And that's why we set out to look at this particular concept, child-friendly justice. And what we did, we started with a World Cafe, and that's a widely used tool for citizen participation, and it also facilitates organisational change. And it's a method that can help to provide really rich data for researchers, but also can be beneficial for participants because you have an opportunity to focus on dialogue and also have mutual learning. And so we had a World Cafe with a number of stakeholders, and we got really rich data from that, which we fed forward. We mapped it against the Brunfen-Brenner's ecological systems theory, and we fed that forward into individual interviews with a range of other stakeholders, including parents. And just to touch on the Brunfen-Brenner's ecological systems theory, we saw that there were relationships and connections within and across levels when we mapped that data. And we found 4 factors that influenced those connections. 2 of them were at a professional or individual level, and 2 of them were at that infrastructural or systems level in terms of the justice system. Now, in terms of thinking about enhancing child-friendly justice, our participants had a number of solutions. And I think I can't go through all of them here. I don't have time, but there was some really interesting information that was coming out. I'm going to pick on 2 that I think can indicate there is positive change happening within the system, but a lot more needs to be done. And the first one is an infrastructural or systems level change. So we have Barna House, and Barna House provides an opportunity for child witnesses to be able to give their evidence in a very child-friendly environment away from that imposing, unfriendly courtroom system or courtroom building. And in doing so, we know that Barna House, those opportunities are, that initiative is expanding, and potentially it has the opportunity to reduce the risk of re-traumatisation for children giving evidence in court. We also see at an individual or a professional level the introduction of intermediaries. And we train intermediaries here in on the Professional Diploma of Intermediary Studies at UL. And an intermediary is a communication specialist who helps to enhance the participation of a vulnerable witness. And they do this by identifying communication strategies, means of accessible communication that's appropriate to that person, and helps them to navigate legal processes. And what we know is that intermediaries, the register was introduced in 2024, and in 2025, ASK supported 209 children through legal proceedings. But in that time, 37 intermediary referrals were made by the DPP. So we're falling short. But we do know change is happening. So what do? Well, we have to recognise what actually is working. How can we build on that? And we're building on that through training, considering trauma-informed practice, enhancing support services, exploring the impact of that intermediary role. And in doing so, we can align with child-friendly principles, or the EU child-friendly justice guidelines, and therefore actually ensure that we are meeting our commitment for the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Thanks very much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Cantwell, and I am a guidance counsellor with the Limerick and Clare Education and Training Board. I work specifically with the migrant communities, and I've had the joy of working with Hadri and Aoife recently, and Kerry from Durres on a project that I'm going to give you the background quickly today. So if I can just ask you all to imagine for a moment being 5 years old again. You walk into a classroom where everyone seems to understand the rules of belonging except you. You open your mouth to speak, and before your words even land, you notice it. The puzzled look, the raised eyebrow, the small laugh that wasn't meant to hurt, but does. For many multilingual children, this is part of their everyday experience. We often celebrate multilingualism as a superpower, and of course it is. But what we don't always talk about is the difficulties that can come with it. People are often wrongly asked to leave their home language behind. I've worked with parents who've been told, try to speak English at home. But language is not just words, it's identity, culture, connection, and belonging. And when children are supported to keep their home language while learning English, they're not being held back, they're being strengthened. And integration should never mean leaving part of yourself behind. It should mean bringing all of you into the room. And this is why our project began.
So the SMILE project is basically a participatory, community-led project. That means the families and early years educators were involved throughout the process. So what we have done is we started with a literature review. We tried to look at both national and international literature, and also practitioner-focused material that's related to policies or local plans, as well as some websites. And we wanted to see some of the strategies and dynamics around supporting multilingualism at home and also in the earlier settings. And then we moved to a word cafe with parents. So we tried, because most of our participants are from a migrant background, and therefore not all of them have English. Mostly was A1 or A0, so we try to allow for multilingual data so they can share with us the dynamics of using home languages in their at home, and also some of the challenges or even good practice when it comes to introducing your culture and home language, especially when you're living in a different country. Then we went to the early years educators. We asked them about their insights and perspectives, and most importantly, their needs when it comes to supporting them to deal or work with multilingual children. So we took all of this data, we analyzed it, and we tried to create arts-based material with the help of an illustrator and graphic designer. So from the research, we have several outputs. First of all, we have the SMILE book, but that's more focused on research and what we have done throughout the project. But for the families, we had small, short visual leaflets that we translated to Arabic, Urdu and French, as well as English. And that's where we talked about misconceptions around multilingualism and intercultural understanding. And then we had some of the strategies that we recommend in relation to culture, language, and community. We also had 2 posters for early years educators. So one poster was about myths around multilingualism that occurred in the data, and then the other poster was aligning with the frameworks of Ashter and Shilta that the early years educators were already familiar with, and that's where we try to give them some techniques of how they can support home languages in their settings, even though they don't speak home language, the home language of the children themselves. And also we had a video that included most of the illustrations that we have created and also translated that video to the languages that occurred. And I think what we want as a next step to the project is basically to use these resources and go to early years settings to actually train them on how to use the resources in real life. And that's it. I hope I'm not. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm here to tell you the story of Arise. Arise is about who gets to use public spaces and who quietly feels that they don't belong. So this project grew directly from conversations in the Autism at UL Special Interest Group, alongside our community partners, in particular DOCUS Midwest Autism Support. DOCUS is a parent-led organisation supporting autistic people through social groups, inclusive events and employment. They also run 3 social enterprises, a cafe, a gym and a printmakers. They're deeply rooted in the community, and they told us something important. Parents spoke about how their teenage and adult children love playgrounds. Playgrounds offer movement, joy, and something called proprioceptive feedback, that grounding sensation that many autistic people seek. But here's the problem. Their children are tall and strong, and the equipment is too small. Other children using the spaces are much smaller. Parents feel watched. They worry their child might accidentally knock someone over, and they don't feel welcome. So they go to playgrounds very early in the morning or when it's lashing rain. And that stayed with us. And around the same time, we were talking with older adults through our colleagues in the Ageing Research Cluster. They described exercise as medicine, something that keeps them living independently. But they also spoke about fear, safety, and accessibility in the outdoors. So different groups, same message. So we decided to act. We applied to the UL Citizens' Assembly, where the people of Limerick decide what projects are funded. The result? The council invited us to co-design a new space in Mungret. Our vision is ambitious, but simple: to create a first-of-its-kind outdoor activity and recreation space in Limerick, designed from the beginning with groups whose voices are often missing. A space for movement, connection, and nature, featuring interactive installations, gentle technologies, and ambient displays, not as gimmicks, but as tools for inclusion. And the heart of our project is listening, especially to people who are rarely asked. We're centering the voices of people with complex communication needs, people who are non-speaking, and people who use augmentative and alternative modes of communication. We're visiting parks with people and their families, observing how they move, how they communicate, where they settle, what they avoid, and what brings joy. We're conducting focus groups with autistic teenagers, and they're drawing their ideal spaces for us and asking their family and their carers about their needs too. Our team brings together lived experience and expertise in design, physical activity, speech and language therapy, occupational therapy, and physiotherapy. And this isn't a one-off consultation. We've built in iterative co-design supported by our incredible MSc design students who are researching inclusive outdoor spaces around the world. So currently we're doing our park observations, our focus groups and our interviews. We're generating our design requirements. And later this month, we're running a series of workshops where we'll ask people with a range of lived and professional experience to contribute to the design of this space here in Limerick. So this is our team, and it's a privilege for me to lead this work. Through the Citizens' Assembly, this project has moved from an idea to drawings, to land, and to responsibility. And we feel that responsibility deeply. Arise is our commitment to deliver something meaningful, inclusive, and worthy of Limerick and its people. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Jade Gill. I'm a PhD student in the psychology department in UL, and I'm supervised by Dr. Anne Kamenescu and Professor Jennifer McMahon, and I'm going to chat you through our PhD project today, Girls' Stories, co-designing a school-based mental wellbeing intervention for adolescent girls from migrant backgrounds. So I'm going to really quickly chat you through the who, the how, the what and the why. So I suppose, kind of anecdotally, we know that migration's at an all-time high around the world and in Ireland. This most recent census said that about 22% of the Irish population are from a migrant background, and Anya so well explained Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory, so I don't have to, which saves me some time. But a young person's development is really strongly impacted by the environments around them, and one of those environments, as we've heard today, is school. So adolescent migrants have higher likelihood to be impacted by negative psychosocial outcomes like anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and this effect is heightened for adolescent migrant girls, so they're more likely to experience what's known as internalising symptoms or anxiety. So the school is a really key place to foster wellbeing for this population. So then the how are we doing this with co-designing this intervention? So the first piece was a literature review looking at what's out there already and how youth voices are amplified in the design of school-based wellbeing interventions. Then I suppose looking at current practice in Ireland. So we did a school survey about provision of wellbeing supports for migrant students. We did focus groups with adolescent migrant girls about what was working well for them and what wasn't working so well. And we did interviews with teachers about their experiences of providing support. And then the findings from these two work packages informed the co-design of a school-based wellbeing intervention, which I'll talk about in a moment, and also an accompanying teacher training. And as you see from the little scientists in the corner, we really placed adolescent migrant girls at the centre of this project. So we had a youth advisory panel of girls who've worked with us for the last 2 years. They've been involved from the start, so they helped design interview and focus group materials. We trained them up as co-researchers or peer researchers to come out and actually deliver the focus groups in schools with adolescent migrant girls, which was really amazing. And they've been there once a month working with us and our adult key stakeholder group to design the intervention. So what came out of this then? I suppose I'll start on the right-hand side and look at the intervention. So we co-designed the Connected Classrooms project in partnership with Narrative 4. So Narrative 4's key methodology is this thing called the story exchange. And in essence, it's I tell your story, you tell mine, in the first person face-to-face. So a storytelling intervention for the whole class where you take on your partner's story and retell it in the first person. It's radical empathy through action, really. So this led to a 6-session workshop that we designed, a 6-session intervention around belonging, understanding, empathy, communication and storytelling that ends in, I suppose, a story exchange. And we tailored this to language supports for students who might have lower levels of English proficiency and additional materials to make it really suitable for a diverse classroom. We also then had to train the facilitators to use this. So Narrative 4 have an existing 8-hour CPD and we designed with the Youth Advisory Panel and our key stakeholders a 2-hour online e-learning module called Facilitating Story Exchanges with Culturally Diverse Youth. So you can see there we had videos from Narrative 4 from our project partners like Duras, Limerick SIPSI, teachers from the LCETB and also our Youth Advisory Panel members featured in the videos and told teachers what they needed from teachers to support them. And I suppose the why then, and the why really is the Youth Advisory Panel and centering that youth voice and giving the girls a space. So I just want to finish with a quote from one of the Youth Advisory Panel members where she said, "Finally having a voice here, I tell you that's the most empowering thing in the world." And I think that's the key, is no research about us without us. So yeah, thank you.
Good morning. So me and Sarah are two PhD students in the School of Allied Health, and we'll be presenting on chronic musculoskeletal pain and neurodivergence in adolescents.
So firstly, what is chronic musculoskeletal pain? So essentially it is pain that affects joints, bones and muscles in the body. It affects about 1 in 5 children globally, which I think often surprises people as people generally associate it with an adult population. Like our adult populations, a biopsychosocial approach to care is recommended, which essentially means addressing the physical, the psychological and social factors, some of which Jade just mentioned as well. Currently, there is no one best treatment, and treatment is usually recommended to be done through a multidisciplinary team, but unfortunately, this is not always accessible for everyone. But then looking at neurodivergence and where that comes in.
So just a little bit of background. The neurodiversity movement began in the early to mid 1990s, and this was driven by autistic communities. A key figure was Jim St. Clair. He was founder of Autism International Network. This was the first online platform to which people could share their experiences. At the same time, journalist and activist Harvey Bloom popularized the term neurodiversity in his articles, comparing it to biodiversity and describing it as a natural human variation. And finally, in 1998, autistic psychologist Judy Singer further developed these ideas in her thesis, framing neurodiversity as a new social movement. The movement itself is grounded in 3 key ideas. Neurodiversity is natural. There's no one normal type of brain, and there's emphasis on changing societal attitudes towards avoiding pathologizing terms. When we look at the research so far, in clinic-based studies, down at the bottom left on the screen, in 2018, a Swedish chronic pain clinic found from a sample of 146 youth with chronic pain that 26% presented with clinically significant symptoms of autism, ADHD, or both, when previously they were only aware of 5%. And similarly, in another study in the United States, same setting, in a sample of 95 youth with chronic pain, they discovered an additional 21% had significant symptoms of autism, when initially they were only aware of 9%. And looking at our larger nationally representative studies, in 2019, Whitney and Shapiro found in the United States that autistic individuals experience twice the prevalence of chronic pain. And most recently, in Chronic Pain Australia, their National Kids in Pain report found that 73% of youth with chronic pain have at least one neurodevelopmental diagnosis. And again, this is most commonly autism and ADHD.
So what we know so far from the scoping reviews that we've completed, so we looked at adolescents that are currently being represented in randomised controlled trials, and we know that they're approximately 15 years old and are mostly girls. This wasn't surprising to us. What was surprising was there's really poor reporting on gender versus sex differences. Most of the participants that are included are from a Caucasian, highly educated background, so we know that they're missing a huge proportion of these kids, and none of them looked at neurodiversity. A second scoping review that we looked at, we know from, I think, pretty much all the talks that we've seen that using patient and public involvement is massively important when working with these teenagers, and only 6% of the studies that we looked at mentioned using any sort of these approaches essentially in implementation. More positively, it was found that the interventions were becoming at least partially more psychologically informed, which is great, but there's still a lot of work to do from that point of view. So where are we going from here with our PhD? So we're lucky enough to be able to collaborate with Children's Health Ireland, specifically the Complex Pain Service, which are based in Crumlin. They're the only specialist paediatric pain service in the entirety of Ireland, so that's including Northern Ireland. They do provide multidisciplinary care through pain education programmes and exercise programmes and intensives, but they are only one service for the entire population. So what we want to know from working with them is, one, what teenagers are being represented and who are attending this service at the moment. What's the prevalence of neurodivergence in this cohort, given that there is globally a massive percentage of these kids who are there? What is helping with these programs, but also what's missing or could be improved, specifically with the kids who are maybe waiting for their initial assessment with this team, or who are being managed in a more community-based setting without necessarily meeting the criteria of being complex enough for this team.
So some take-home messages from us. We definitely do not know all the answers. And for the researchers, we would recommend prioritising patient and public involvement, and this is a key piece of both of our PhD projects. For clinicians, we would recommend to consider neurodivergence in your adolescents with chronic musculoskeletal pain to optimise treatment approaches. And for those with the lived experiences, your voices matter, and you could help shape the future of research. Thank you very much.
So, hi everyone. My name is Rachel Murphy and I'm a postdoctoral researcher in the School of Allied Health, working with Associate Professor Aoife Gallagher. And I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you a little bit about our research looking at gender and developmental language disorder. So I'm sure many of you here are familiar with neurodevelopmental differences like autism and ADHD, but you may be less familiar with developmental language disorder, or DLD. To put it simply, this is a condition that affects how children both understand and use language. And like other neurodevelopmental differences, it can impact social interactions, academic achievement, and mental health. And research has demonstrated a link between DLD and mental health problems such as depression and anxiety. So even though DLD is not widely known by the public, it's actually very common, with research indicating that 1 in 14 children have the disorder. Population studies also indicate that DLD affects both boys and girls equally. However, boys are often twice as likely to receive language services. So this means that a large proportion of girls are just not being heard. Our research then aims to address this question and look at why girls are less likely to receive language services than boys. We are collaborating with a team of expert researchers from the United States on a 4-year project that's funded by the National Institute for Health Research. This project is led by Professor Carla McGregor, who is a professor at the University of Iowa, a research scientist at Boys Town Research Hospital, and an advocate and expert in DLD. So within our research, we're looking at several potential explanations for these differences. So first, we are examining adult gender biases. So we are trying to understand whether adults treat boys' language difficulties more seriously than girls. We know that this applies in other health areas, so it could also apply to language difficulties. We're also looking at social masking, so we know that in other neurodevelopmental conditions, girls often socially mask, they mimic socially accepted behaviour, so this may also apply to DLD. And finally, we're investigating temperament. So we're looking at whether boys demonstrate frustration with their language difficulty more openly and therefore receive services or receive attention from the adults around them. So within our research, we're using mixed methods. So on the quantitative side of things, we are looking at longitudinal data. So we're looking at data from over 1.6 million children in the United States. We are also conducting surveys with parents and professionals examining their gender biases and how this may influence language service receipt of children. And on the qualitative side, we are conducting interviews. So we are interviewing both parents and children to understand their experiences of DLD. So we want this project to have an impact on professionals. So we want our research to help professionals to more accurately recognise and understand DLD in girls. We also hope by disseminating our research that we can help parents to recognise the needs of their children. And finally, our overall aim is to increase service equity and improve equality across language services. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you to Rachel for telling us a little about DLD, so I don't have to. I'm here to talk about some work underway, which is ultimately intending to improve the reporting, design, and relevance of research to children with developmental language disorder, who represent over 6 million children in Europe, and as Rachel said, 1 to 2 children in every classroom. This is a proposed theory of change describing speech and language therapy practice and service delivery, onto which I've front-ended some statements from children in our project to date. So we think of a speech and language therapy activity designed to help a child to produce better sentences. We hope that this will enable them to understand the types of sentences that litter science textbooks, to have better conversations with friends, ultimately to participate, to learn, to have better life chances. However, there is a problem with research, one of the things that drives this practice. And it's reflected here in some work we've done to look at published intervention studies related to children with or at risk of developmental language disorder. Not surprising that there's been a heavy emphasis on measuring changes in grammar, vocabulary, understanding and producing language, reflected in these 2 large sections here. To a lesser extent, people are measuring changes in children's ability to tell a story or follow a conversation, and measuring things like changes in the behaviours that teachers, parents and others use to support children's language development. But least reflected of all in the measures are measures of participation. So do they use those enhanced conversational skills in the classroom, at home, etc., etc.? And given the gap between research and practice, this is a problem. So to address this, we're developing a core outcome set And a core outcome set is an agreed set of things we want to change or improve in a given health need or condition. And it focuses with a particular population in mind, usually developed through a mixture of investigation and consensus. And to develop one for DLD, we need to involve children with DLD and their families. So nominal group technique is one such consensus-building measure. It's a great way to ensure participation equally across a group of people. It supports them with generating ideas, with ranking and prioritising those ideas, but as you would think, could be challenging for children with DLD. And it isn't just a question of them having the right words to say what their important outcomes are, but understanding concepts like least, most, and relating that to their experience of speech and language therapy is challenging. So we have adapted and innovated the nominal group technique for the purposes of finding out from children with DLD what's important to them. Supported by a system known as talking maths. And this is just an example of ideas generated by one girl with DLD. Coincidentally, at the time, she was in the process of choosing her GCSE subjects. So we've pivoted to a two-stage individual followed by group process for the nominal group technique. And she's suggested here the things that would matter to her as changes as a result of participating in speech and language therapy. These are ideas generated by boys, both ideas they came up with independently, which were drawn by the researchers on picture cards, and symbols they selected from the Talking Maths pool of ideas, and used the Talking Maths top scale to indicate these are the most important, these are the least important, and so on. There are other aspects to our research process which have been informed by our experts by experience. We're working with children and adults with DLD around how to design our approach. And finally, these are examples of some differences that are emerging with respect to what children deem important and what parents deem important when we ask them about outcomes of speech and language therapy, consistent with work that Aoife has done previously. Ultimately, we will combine the findings from children, therapists, educators, researchers across the 7 countries involved in our project to produce a core outcome set. And this core outcome set will be part of research reporting guidelines, which will seek to improve the relevance and the value of research in the area of DLD and ultimately improve outcomes for children with DLD. So thank you to all of those involved.
Hello everyone. Thanks to Aoife for giving me so much credit for coming from Dublin. I don't think I deserve that much credit, but I'll take it. Poor Sue came from Cleveland. I know. So great to be here today. I'm presenting on behalf of Siobhan O'Shea, who's a PhD candidate under Aoife's supervision and Melissa Prunty as well. So Siobhan had a recent arrival and is on maternity leave, but she developed a slide. So I'm familiar with Siobhan's work because we both work in the National Council for Special Education, and I've been into Siobhan's school to see the work that she's doing. So we're going to start with, I suppose, the most important data set, which is the voice of the child or the children collectively. So we know from the Children's School Lives study that students lose enjoyment in school as they progress, describing their learning as repetitive and overloaded, which can lead to, I suppose, symptoms of anxiety and emotional distress over time. So what Siobhan's work involved was working within a inclusion-focused, multi-tiered model of support that really prioritised the collaborative relationships between the OT and the teacher as the best methods to bring about improved learning and participation outcomes for the students in the classroom. So we can kind of see here from the picture that Siobhan was really focusing on the classroom environment and changing the environment of the classroom to be more flexible to meet the diverse needs of the students in the classroom. So this would involve, I suppose, establishing a consistent routine. That really kind of makes things more predictable for students, especially students who struggle with changing environments and changing demands. Introduced a focus on simple tasks, And really, I think most importantly, or most significantly in this case, frequent opportunities for movement, which incorporated action songs for learning and alternative seating options, including classrooms that had no tables and chairs in them for an entire day a week, moving up to 2 and 3 days a week. And even the movement of the furniture and removing the furniture offered really kind of productive, relevant learning, kind of physical literacy learning for the students in doing that. So the result from the work is, most importantly, more movement. I'm sure you're very aware, or those working in education, of the concept of movement breaks, and you hear a lot about SNAs removing children from movement breaks in schools, which is better than the students becoming so dysregulated that behaviour becomes an issue. But really we should be meeting the needs of children, the regulation needs of children within the classroom, without needing to remove them. So it's the concept of academic infused movement. So the learning should be a regulating experience, and that's what this classroom in particular in a school in Kildare were achieving. Ultimately, again, the big outcome here was student engagement, increased student engagement and participation. So what did some of the key stakeholders say? So the children thought it's more comfortable doing crisscross applesauce than just sitting down. They said that they like sitting on the floor for English or SESE and Gaeilge because it means I can concentrate more. So they really valued that flexibility in how they position their bodies. The class teacher, Fanula, I think was her name, I also found that when children were engaged in this way, it made it easier for me to get down and support them, which in turn helped their engagement and their learning. So the teacher was literally meeting the students where they were learning, which was on the floor. So the teachers were literally getting down on the floor with the children to check in with them as to how they're progressing. And then from the principal's perspective, once we see the success and hear how worthwhile the initiative is, more and more people are willing to give things a go. So in school-based therapy practice, OT practice and SLT practice, that cascading is really important. One teacher gives something a go, gets success, and it cascades through the rest of the school environment. So a final thought to end on, or a takeaway message from Matt Pittman: we don't design our learning around the furniture, we design the furniture around the learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much to everybody, all of the amazing speakers, our keynote and the lightning talk speakers. I had this 5 minutes drilled into everybody so well, and now I'm like, take your time. I go, no, you're fine, keep going. And they're like, no, this is what you wanted, this is what you're getting. So we're actually well on time, so thank you so much. And what they've done really is what they have an incredible job in synthesizing really complicated projects for the seminar today, multi-phase, multi-method projects. So thank you so much to everybody for keeping so well with the time. I just want to before I hand over to Judy, who will summarise and close the session, I just wanted to say a few words. These speakers think they're getting away today from me, and they're just not, basically. So what we want to do, what we're hoping to do, and we've had some early discussions in the School of Allied Health with Caroline, Michelle, Judy, etc., is that we'd like to build more capacity in children's research and to bring people interested in children's research together, not just within the School of Allied Health, but across UL. So we're getting quite excited at the idea of having a research group where we can get together with stakeholders and where we can continue our work together. So if you're interested to stay in touch with us, we would be really, really delighted if you got in touch, even by email, to me personally at aoife.gallagher@ul. Alternatively, you can come to our next event on the 3rd of June, which will be delivered by Professor Carla McGregor, who's visiting from the States. Rachel mentioned Carla is the PI on the LAMP project, the Girls and Boys project with DLD. That's the 3rd of June at 11 a.m. here at UL. So extending an open invitation to everybody to come along to that. That will be a hybrid event because we want to also invite speech and language therapy practitioners
to that. But just bear that in mind as you leave today. I'm going to hand you over to Professor Judy Pettigrew, who's the head of the School of Allied Health, and she will close the event. Thanks, Judy.
So, once again, thank you for all the fantastic presentations. Thank you, Sue, so much. And Aoife, thank you. A huge amount of organisation and leadership, and really you deserve a clap. Thanks also to Research Week for giving us this opportunity. It's greatly appreciated. And there's nothing more to say. Thank you to all the audience for coming on Bank Holiday Friday. So the session is closed. Thank you very much.